Welcome everyone to this deep dive. We're taking the material you sent in, all focused on Friedrich Hayek, and really trying to pull out the key insights.
Yeah, Hayek, definitely a giant in economic thought. We've got some great sources, excerpts, analyses, even a neat survey note summarizing things.
And our mission today really is to get past maybe this surface-level understanding. We want to dig into his core ideas about free markets, see how they spread, and uncover some, well, surprising bits.
Like his views on a social safety net, perhaps.
Exactly. That one definitely caught my eye. Okay, so let's dive in. Where do we start with Hayek?
I think you have to start with his idea of spontaneous order. It's pretty fundamental to everything else.
Spontaneous order. Okay, what did he mean by that exactly?
Well, he argued that free markets aren't, like, invented or designed by some government committee. They just emerge.
We merge, naturally.
Yeah, from the countless actions of individuals buying, selling, making things. It's the opposite of, central planning, where someone tries to direct the whole show.
Okay, that's a big shift in perspective. But how does that actually work? How does all that separate action create a functioning order?
Well, that's where the price mechanism comes in. This was crucial for Hayek. He wrote this really influential essay in 1945, The Use of Knowledge in Society.
Right, I saw that mentioned. What was the core argument there?
He said prices are basically a communication system. They transmit what he called dispersed knowledge.
Dispersed knowledge.
Yeah.
Meaning all the little bits of information everyone has.
Exactly. Think about it, what people want, what materials cost, what production methods work best. The knowledge is spread out everywhere. No single planner, no computer could possibly gather all of it.
Yeah, impossible. Just way too much information, constantly changing too.
Precisely. But prices, they condense it.
Yeah.
If, say, tin becomes scarcer, its price goes up.
Okay.
And that single price signal tells everyone, users of tin, producers of substitutes, that they need to economize on tin or find alternatives or maybe produce more tin.
Without anyone needing to know why it got scarcer, they just react to the price.
That's the beauty of it, according to Hayek. It coordinates all this activity incredibly efficiently. He even compared it to language in his later book, The Fatal Conceit.
Language. How did that comparison work?
Well, like language, the price system wasn't consciously designed. It evolved through use, through human interaction, becoming this sophisticated tool for communication without any central direction.
That's a powerful analogy. Language helps us share ideas. Prices help us coordinate economic actions. It really makes it click.
And understanding that spontaneous order and how prices make it work is key to understanding his deep skepticism of central planning.
Which brings us squarely to The Road to Serfdom, right? His most famous or maybe infamous book.
Absolutely. Published in 1944 during World War II, it was a stark warning.
A warning about what specifically?
That trying to centrally plan an economy, even with good intentions, inevitably sets you on a path, well, on the road to serfdom, towards losing individual liberty and ending up with totalitarianism.
Why did he think it was inevitable?
Because to control economic life, the state needs more and more power. It has to decide who gets what gets produced. And eventually, that means controlling people's choices, suppressing disagreement, and using coercion. Economic control couldn't be separated from social control, in his view.
Wow, that's a strong claim. And that book really took off, didn't it?
It really did. It became a cornerstone for classical liberalism, for libertarian thought. You mentioned the sources noted it got condensed in Reader's Digest in '45.
Yeah. Which must have put these pretty complex ideas in front of a huge general audience.
Absolutely. It moved beyond just academic debate and became a real touchstone for advocating limited government and free markets. It painted a pretty stark picture.
It certainly sounds like it.
Yeah.
But was Hayek just saying government bad, market good, full stop? Or was it more complex? You hinted at that earlier.
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting and maybe challenges the popular image. The sources are clear. Hayek wasn't an anarchist. He wasn't arguing for no state at all.
Okay, so what role did he see for the government then?
He saw a vital, though limited, role. Things like maintaining the rule of law, clear, predictable rules for everyone, enforcing contracts, protecting private property rights.
So providing the basic framework for the market for that spontaneous order to function properly.
Exactly. These were essential foundations. But here's the surprising part we mentioned. He also argued for a social safety net.
Right. The safety net. That seems counterintuitive, maybe, given his critique of state control.
It does at first glance. But he actually supported things like ensuring a basic minimum income for everyone and forms of social insurance.
Really? Where did he argue for that?
It's there in The Road to Serfdom, and he developed it more in his later work like the Law, Legislation, and Liberty trilogy.
And what was his reasoning? How did he square that with free markets?
Well, his argument wasn't about the state trying to control economic outcomes or achieve perfect equality. It was more about providing a basic level of security, a floor below which people wouldn't fall. He thought this could actually make a free society more stable and acceptable.
So it wasn't about planning the economy, but about providing basic security within a market economy.
Precisely. It's a crucial nuance. He wasn't advocating for laissez-faire in the absolute sense. He saw a role for government in setting rules and providing that basic security, just not directing the whole economic show.
That definitely adds depth to his position. It's not just black and white.
Not at all. And understanding this helps us see the intellectual tradition he came from, the Austrian school of economics.
The Austrian school, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
What are the sort of defining features of that school? How did it influence Hayek?
Well, the Austrians really focus on the individual. Economic phenomena, they argue, have to be understood starting from individual actions and choices. Methodological individualism, they call it.
Okay, focus on the individual. What else?
They use logical deduction praxeology rather than relying heavily on mathematical models or empirical data, though data isn't ignored. They stress subjective value isn't inherent in goods, it's in how individuals perceive them.
Right, and entrepreneurship.
Huge emphasis on entrepreneurship and innovation as the engines of the market process. It's a dynamic view of the economy, constantly changing, driven by individuals discovering and acting on opportunities.
And you can really see how Hayek's ideas fit in there, can't you? The dispersed knowledge, the market as a process, the focus on individual action.
Absolutely. His work on how prices transmit information, that whole idea, is deeply rooted in the Austrian tradition. And as you noted, that work on knowledge and economic fluctuations was central to his Nobel Prize in '74.
A Nobel Prize, yeah. Shared with Gunnar Myrdal, wasn't it? Who had quite different views.
Yes, ironically. But the committee specifically recognized Hayek's analysis of how knowledge is used in different economic systems and his work on money and business cycles. It was a massive boost for his ideas globally.
So it really amplified his intellectual impact. Let's talk about that impact. We mentioned The Road to Serfdom, popularizing ideas.
Right, that was huge for reaching a broader audience. And then just a few years later, in 1947, he co-founded the Mont Pelerin Society.
The Mont Pelerin Society. The sources made that sound pretty significant, like a key network.
Oh, it was incredibly important. Think about the post-war era Keynesianism. Interventionist ideas were very dominant. This society brought together thinkers who were skeptical of that trend. People like Milton Friedman, George Stigler, Ludwig von Mises.
Wow, big name. So it was a place to develop and sustain these classical, liberal, free market ideas.
Exactly. A network for support, for intellectual exchange, for keeping those ideas alive and developing them during a time when they weren't exactly mainstream. It played a really crucial long-term role.
And eventually those ideas did become more mainstream, didn't they?
They did. I mean, Jeffrey Sachs, who's certainly not always seen as a Hayekian, noted in an interview in '91 how even mainstream economists, including socialists, had come to accept the core of Hayek's critique of central planning. That shows how powerful his arguments were.
So a major intellectual shift over decades. And this wasn't just academic, right? It spilled over into actual policy.
Definitely. You see a very clear influence on political leaders who came to prominence later, particularly Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the US.
Thatcher, right. Didn't she famously pull out a copy of Hayek's The Constitution of Liberty at a meeting once?
She did back in 1975, apparently saying something like, "This is what we believe." Both her government and the Reagan administration pursued market-oriented reforms, privatization, deregulation that were very much in line with the intellectual framework Hayek had helped build.
So a direct line from his ideas to major policy shifts in the West. But the influence went even further, didn't it? Into Eastern Europe.
Yes, and this is quite remarkable. His books, especially The Road to Serfdom, were apparently read secretly underground in communist countries during the Cold War.
Wow. Passed around in secret.
Seems so.
Yeah.
And they provided an intellectual basis for opposing the communist system and thinking about what could come after.
Did any specific figures mention his influence?
Yes, the sources point to people like Mont Pelerin, who became Prime Minister of Estonia and implemented significant free market reforms, and Václav Klaus, who was key in the Czech transition. Both explicitly credited Hayek as a major influence on their thinking.
That's incredible. From academic theory to underground readings influencing the collapse of the Soviet bloc and the rebuilding afterwards.
It really underscores the power ideas can have, and his work didn't just become irrelevant after the Cold War.
How so?
Well, his ideas continue to be debated and drawn upon. Think about discussions around monetary policy, especially after the 2008 financial crisis. His theories on business cycles got renewed attention, and debates about economic transitions and the role of the state are still informed by his framework.
And you still see his legacy in institutions too, right? LSE, Chicago, Freiburg.
Absolutely. The London School of Economics, University of Chicago, University of Freiburg, places he taught, and things like the annual Hayek Lecture at the NYU Journal of Law and Liberty. His intellectual footprint is still very much present.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, it feels like we've covered a lot of ground. What are the absolute core takeaways on Hayek?
I'd say first, that concept of spontaneous order of the market as an emergent phenomenon, not a design machine. Second, the crucial role of prices in communicating that vital dispersed knowledge.
Okay, order and knowledge through prices.
Third, his powerful warning in The Road to Serfdom about central planning and liberty, a warning that still resonates. Fourth, remembering the nuance. He wasn't anti-state entirely. He supported rule of law and, importantly, that social safety net idea.
Right, the often missed nuance.
And finally, just his immense impact intellectually through things like the Mont Pelerin Society and the Nobel, and historically influencing policy from Thatcher and Reagan to the post-communist transitions.
So for you listening, getting a handle on Hayek really does provide a valuable lens for looking at so many economic debates happening right now. His ideas are definitely still in the mix.
They really are.
Yeah.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Well, given Hayek's huge emphasis on dispersed knowledge and how crucial decentralized price signals are, what does that mean for us today? In our world, which is increasingly digital, swimming in data, often very centralized data,
Interesting question.
are we actually making the best use of decentralized information in the way Hayek envisioned? Or are things like, say, big tech platforms or massive government databases creating new kinds of centralization, new challenges to harnessing that dispersed knowledge effectively?
That's a really fascinating question to think about. What are the implications of Hayek's ideas in the age of big data and AI? Something to definitely ponder.
Indeed.
This has been incredibly insightful. We hope this deep dive has illuminated Hayek's complex thought and lasting influence for you. Keep exploring these ideas.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.